We first saw him as a restless farm boy on a desert planet, only to discover he's destined for something far greater. Guided by mentors, tested by loss, and tempted by darkness, his journey mirrors the classic hero's path, one of growth, sacrifice, and ultimately hope. He doesn't just battle the forces of an evil empire, he confronts the deeper struggle within himself, proving that even in a galaxy overshadowed by fear, redemption and compassion can prevail. We're talking about Luke Skywalker. Here we go. And here we are again for another episode of Greatest Characters in Pop Culture History. I am Nick, and my guest again is Alexandria Pascucci, who you might remember as my co-host for the Princess Leia episode. And today we're going to talk about Luke Skywalker. So welcome back.
Thank you. We talked about one twin. We have to talk about the other.
Yes. And
And I
then,
have my Star Wars shirt on again.
there you go. I was trying to see what I had. I don't have like anymore. I used to have all of it. So I wore my like Jedi black. That's as close as
Oh,
I can get to Luke
I
Skywalker.
see.
When you do cosplay and stuff at conventions, and do you see people dress up like Luke, or is it more like a Leia and a lot from the cartoons and Boba Fett's and all that stuff? Is Luke still popular when it comes to cosplay?
I do see Luke, but honestly, I wish I saw more. I feel like as the newer stuff comes out, it's more of that. But the most Lukes I do see are the Return of the Jedi ones, like the
Yeah.
black.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
So
Jedi.
that's always cool. But I feel like we
Yeah.
need more Lukes at conventions.
Hey, I hope so. I would like to see more. So Star Wars, we talked about this last time, about how we both fell in love with Star Wars and all the characters. I am old enough to remember going to the first Star Wars in 1977. My dad took me, and I didn't know what to expect, and it just blew me away, made me fall in love with Star Wars. And then the sequel, Empire Strikes Back, that's when the big twist, because before that, it was just like fun and, space adventures. And then it became this real drama with his dad, and he's got a sister and all this. So, what a great hero's journey, right? That whole trilogy.
The ultimate hero's journey, I'd say.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think even
So,
George says it too.
absolutely. So, what do you think about Luke himself as a character? Because I know you love Leia. I know you love Padme. What do you think about Luke and how he fits into all of that?
Yeah, well, I think he is the ultimate hero, and not only because of his force powers and the strong Jedi he becomes, but I think there's a humanity that we can all relate to in him because he starts at very humble beginnings and he doesn't know what he's capable of. He doesn't know he has the force. So I think he's sort of relatable in that way, and I think that's part of what makes him so iconic.
Yeah, the first time we see him, he's just this farm boy on this desert planet, farming for moisture. You know, like what can you farm on a desert? But I
Right.
mean, that's so great. And everybody's like, well, how much of the story did George Lucas really have in his head? When the first novelization came out, which came out before Star Wars, like a year before, it was ghostwritten by Alan Dean Foster, I think. And the subtitle was, it was just Star Wars, The Adventures of Luke Skywalker. So even back then, Luke was the center of this whole thing. And you said he's so human. He's just
Mhm.
this naive kid who wants action, and he doesn't know what he's asking for, because it's the hero's journey, like we said, where you get all this danger. You start out as this naive kid, and you really grow up and you're tempted. And you said relatable too, right? All the stuff that we deal with, you see it through his character's eyes, right?
Yeah, and like you said, he's really just thrown into it. He always dreams of a bigger life, but I feel his loyalty to his aunt and uncle kind of
Mm.
holds him back. And he could have just run away from that, but he didn't. And once they're ultimately killed, he says, "There's nothing left for me here now." And that's when he decides, like, to become what he wants to, even though he doesn't really know what lies ahead, but he knows he wants more.
Yeah, and he's learned all this stuff on the planet Tatooine, right? He's already becoming kind of a pilot. He says a couple of times, "I'm not such a bad pilot myself," right? And then he proves it when they're going against the Death Star. but he just dreams of going out. There's that scene. I used to have this book called the Star Wars Storybook, and it was an adaptation of the script. So it had scenes that were cut, like his buddy Biggs, that whole
Yes.
preface. And he's looking up with his binoculars or whatever they are, and he sees the battle in space. That's when 3PO and R2 are shot out and come to the planet. So he's just dreaming. He wants to go out there. He wants to fight. And then it's Obi-Wan, Ben, his buddy Ben, who's been really
Mhm.
protecting him with his aunt and uncle hidden there. And it's finally when he gets that message from Leia, and he's like, he knows, okay, let's go. But
Yeah.
yeah, he doesn't know about his dad though. What do you think of that
Mhm.
whole thing? Separating them uh when they were young.
I'm just a huge fan of the Skywalker family as a whole, and I could talk so much about that, but he has the original story from Obi-Wan or Ben. That's not the truth, but he sees his father as such a hero, and that is inspiring him to want to do the same. And then once he ultimately finds out who his father is, I mean, of course, there's this horror, but at the same time, his ultimate goal is to redeem him.
Mhm.
And I just find that so fascinating. Leia kind of has a different view and doesn't want anything to do with him and thinks he should be destroyed. But Luke's whole take on it is so fascinating to me. And yeah, I think that's what makes him such a great and powerful Jedi, is
Yeah, he
that he
believes in
doesn't
his dad. Yeah.
yeah, he doesn't want to defeat him through a lightsaber battle. His whole
Mhm.
goal throughout the whole thing is to redeem him.
Yeah. Yeah, because when Ben is telling him the story, and then later he finds out that was all a lie, but he's like, "Yeah, from a certain point of view, from a certain perspective." Like, it's like he kinda twists the truth. But you're right. I think when he finds out in Empire Strikes Back, when he says the famous lines, "I am your father," he's shocked, like you said, but then you see he accepts it pretty quickly. It's not like he spends Return of the Jedi denying it. I don't believe it. He kind of accepts that truth, and like you said, he wants to turn him over. He goes and he's like, I'm going to bring you back to the bright side, right? That's just incredible.
Right. And, he talks to Obi-Wan about it. He talks to Yoda about it. And that's where he gets the confirmation. And he just quickly decides that's what his main goal is. And which I personally love because Padme's last dying words is there's still good in him. And I just
Mhm.
love how poetic that is that he
Yeah,
carries that on and has the same belief.
there is. And do you think maybe that being force sensitive, maybe that's what makes him kind of accept that this is his father, and even Leia is his sister? Because Leia's kind of like, yeah, I know.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
they're not really
Oh
that
yeah.
surprised.
No, I love that scene where he tells her. Um, oh yeah, that's like one of my favorite scenes.
So great. It's so great. Yeah, and then that first movie, we don't know that Darth Vader is his father and Leia is his sister. So you've got Han Solo coming into the picture, and he's this rogue, and there's that dynamism between Han and Leia, but then there's also the triangle because you think maybe Luke might be there. And I don't think Lucas ever really intended that to be. He always meant it to be Han and Leia. What do you think of that? Do you agree?
I agree. Yeah, I think he tried to throw us off a little bit,
He did.
which now we look back and we're like, oh, they didn't know. But yeah, I think it was always planned. I think it was set up to be Leia and Han, but you kind of
I
wouldn't
think so.
expect it because they didn't get along so well in the beginning.
Exactly, exactly. There was always that chemistry between Han and Leia from the beginning.
Mm,
So when Lucas first created the story, he actually called the character Star Killer.
mm.
And then he wanted to change it because at that time you had Charles Manson, the murders when he was killing the celebrities and all that. So he felt that didn't fit right. But it's the kind of name, Star Killer, Skywalker. I mentioned Biggs before, and Biggs' last name
Mhm.
was Darklighter. It's just it fits these kind of epic fantasy kind of story names. Um, it's such a
Yeah, I don't think I heard about Dark Light.
yeah. I think
That's
Biggs'
a new
last name
one.
was Darklighter, but it just sounds like something from Spaceballs or something when you
Yeah, right? That's
uh
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
hear, yeah, about how George ended up changing Starkiller to Skywalker. He said it was too harsh,
Mhm.
especially for
Yeah, it
that
makes sense.
character. Didn't
Yeah.
fit with.
Yeah, it totally didn't fit. So what's the order of movies that you saw? I think you saw the prequels, right? Or the
I
you sh
actually saw Return of the Jedi
Okay.
first, and
Mhm.
then I love the Ewoks,
Love the
love
Ewoks.
Leia. I think that whole end fight as a kid, I just fell in love with it. And at that time, is when I think it was like 8 or 9 when the first prequel came out. So those are the ones I grew up with. So because I watched Return of the Jedi, I wanted to see the prequels. And then I went backwards, I think, to see Empire Strikes Back, then A New Hope. And I kind of always wished that I was around to see them out in the right order, to have that shock to find out that Vader is Luke's father. Because I always think about what was that like in the theater to
It was
hear that for
amazing.
the first time.
This was the days before spoilers, before the internet,
Mhm.
so it was a shock, it was like, we couldn't believe it. People were like, "No!" And that whole summer afterwards, we kept saying, like, it couldn't be true. We were like, we thought it was just Vader trying to get into his head and turn him over to the dark side. So even right up until Return of the Jedi came out, we still thought that was the case. And they would do these promos where they would show that scene of Luke next to Vader, and Luke is wearing all black. And we were like, no, he's turned to the dark side.
And you had to wait a whole 3 years.
Exactly. It was so good. It's so much fun. And, he gets his hand chopped off and he really becomes down that path like Vader was going. So it's just, I think, great storytelling, you know?
Yeah. And I think that was another thing George talked about, that having his hand cut off was very symbolic. Vader kind of severing that father-son relationship and making it more, I'm going to take you on as an apprentice, as well as kind of lining up with Anakin gets his arm chopped off,
Mhm.
and then that happens to Luke. There's so many hidden meanings and symbolism in in these films that I love finding out about. It's just so fun.
Yeah, I wrote a blog post many years ago, and about a circle theory. That's what I had. When I saw that first movie, which is now called A New Hope, but when it was Star Wars, I noticed there's circles everywhere. Lucas was a great director. And everywhere you got the Death Star, and just everywhere you look, there's circle motifs. So I was like, talking about that and just the circle theory and how he started with episode 4. Then he went back to the prequels, and now we've got sequels. And I just thought it was like this kind of circular storytelling. So when I went back, when they re-released them before the prequels came out, they were doing a documentary. And I remember being in front of the camera trying to talk about this circle because I thought Lucas was going to see it. So I was so nervous and I was stuttering and it made no sense. But this is kind of like a circular storytelling. Like you said, he lays so many symbols and so many callbacks and so many references and even lines that you think, okay, that's lazy writing. Oh, everybody says that, but in a way, it fits because I think those are sayings that all these characters would say. I've got a bad feeling about this or something because it's like they're living in a world where the force exists and people believe in that. So I could see where that would become like a saying. So I just I love it. I love
And that's,
every bit
yeah,
of it.
those things have now become so popular. A lot of the things that, people made fun of George Lucas for, I think people are coming around to it.
Hmm.
A lot of people are
Yeah,
coming around to it.
yeah.
And yeah, I think, well, I know I was just watching, I'm always watching George Lucas documentaries and Star Wars documentaries. I'm such a nerd at that. But George pretty much had the background written before um, A New Hope. He had an idea of everything. So everything was so well thought out with these films, and people weren't even aware of that.
Yeah. And then he did the prequels, thank goodness. Even though people gave
Yeah.
it's not, but I look at them again and they still hold up. Like I still had fun,
Yeah.
even with their
Mhm.
flaws and everything. And even the sequels, I still love that they brought back Luke and all of that. In that first movie with Ben, there is all those fantasy tropes. Ben is like a wizard, and Luke is on this journey to become a knight. And then Ben dies, sacrifices himself in his fight, which is going back in circles again because Vader was his pupil. What do you think of that dynamic with Luke and Ben and Obi-Wan? Because now you see the prequels, and you see how hard it must have been for Ben and that relationship he had with Padme to take these kids and separate them, and seeing him sacrifice himself, must have
Mm.
it just broke my heart when, at the
Yeah.
end of that movie, he's just, so
Yeah.
defeated.
Yeah, especially when you now go back and look at the prequels, you can see like he really loved those kids and what if
Mhm.
well, he ultimately does end up sacrificing his life for them, and he truly has all this hope in Luke that's ultimately what Obi-Wan is waiting for, to train Luke, because he has so much hope in him, not only because he has the Force in him, but I, he feels like he can really train him to redeem the Jedi, and yeah, that's something I love so much. And the way Obi-Wan is portrayed in the beginning of A New Hope is kind of like seen as like this crazy old wizard. And then we see what a warrior he was. And we ultimately find
Absolutely.
that out towards the end of A New Hope. We get the idea, but I think we can see it from a different perspective now, having the prequels.
And Ewan McGregor was so good in the
So good.
prequels and in the Obi-Wan series. I loved it.
And that,
A
yeah, that sort of gives another look at even though we don't see them really interact, but you see how much Obi-Wan wants to connect with Luke even at such a young age, like how he brings the toy to him. He's planting those seeds and forming a relationship with him, which I love.
It's so
So
good.
good.
It's so good. We have to talk about Mark Hamill, who's played the character and really epitomizes it. There'll be times we talked about this last time we got together. Your episode, by the way, about Princess Leia was one of the top 2 episodes of our podcast. So Star Wars is great. You're great. People love, hearing you talk about it. Mark Hamill wasn't the only one who auditioned for the role. You had a bunch of people. We talked about the people that were considered for Leia, but you had Robbie Benson, who's a TV actor, not a very well-known name now, but he's the voice of Beauty and the Beast, right? He did that.
Mhm.
William Catt is a more well-known name. He was Greatest American Hero. He was Pippin on Broadway. Had the curly hair, the blonde curly hair. But again, not as well-known of a name. If he had been cast as Luke, he would have been through the stratosphere. Kurt
Mhm.
Russell was probably the biggest name. I see him more as like a Han Solo type. I'm surprised he was
Eh,
in the running for
Yeah.
Luke.
Yeah, I would have thought he'd be in the running for Han
Yeah,
Solo.
yeah.
Yeah.
But at that time, he was younger.
Yeah.
But out of all of them, I could probably see him doing it. There was also Charles Martin Smith, who is not a household name now, but when people see his face, he was in American Graffiti. Very kind of like a quiet kind of character. So you could see the
Mhm.
types with Robbie Benson, Charles Martin Smith. He was going for this kind of young, innocent kid. He wasn't going for this established action hero like a Han
Mhm.
Solo. He wasn't going for that type at all. I guess Kurt Russell was the closest one that could have been either or, right?
Yeah. And
Were there any other actors that you think what might have been fitting the role
I mean,
back at the time, or
of course, you just can't think of anyone else except Mark Hamill. Even looking
Mark
back
Hamill?
at his auditions,
Mhm.
George always knew what he wanted, and he stuck with that, even if the audience was unsure if those actors worked for the characters. George always knew what he wanted, and even the way Mark Hamill auditioned for Luke, that's what he carried on into the character. So of course, I'm just so biased. I can't picture anyone else.
I know at this
And
at
he's
this point.
yeah, and he has stayed so committed to this character, and he truly loves that character, which is so great to see even now.
Yep, and they had no idea that this was going to become the blockbuster that it became. And I guess it kept them also from maybe getting some other parts because now people just automatically looked at these actors. Harrison Ford was able to turn
Mhm.
into an amazing career, and Mark Hamill has done some great voice work, and he did some other things here and there, but he will always be identified as Luke Skywalker. He had an accident in between the other 2 films, right? So they didn't
Mhm.
know if there even was going to be another sequel. They did a novel called Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which was more of
Yeah.
a low budget, right? So it was another
Mhm.
adventure with Luke and Leia, just in case they didn't have the budget to make a big, sequel. But thankfully, it was a blockbuster, so they made The Empire Strikes Back. But Mark Hamill gets into an accident and his face gets all messed up. So there's all this story about how they played up like the accidents that he had and played that into the role, into the storyline. So he's
I know.
looks a little more disfigured. He's been through hell and back, right?
Luckily, it worked for the character.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know, that you can say he's been through some stuff. But yeah,
exactly.
yeah, I heard about that, and it was pretty serious. And
Yeah,
yeah, it could have affected the character, but I think it luckily worked out pretty well
yeah. And thankfully he survived it because I heard it was
to
pretty
make it.
pretty intense. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then you got Empire, and that's where he's going through his training, and he meets Yoda. And I guess in this, it took me a while when I was a kid to realize that they train them when they're young. Like you're not a teenager and like going off to college to learn to be a Jedi. They teach you when you're a kid. So he was old, and that's when Yoda's like, no, too old. Can't teach him. You know, he's stubborn. So I love those training sequences. What do you think about
Yeah.
his interaction with Yoda?
Yeah, very old to compared to when we see the younglings. Like even when Anakin was first presented to the Jedi Council at 9, they said he was too old. So
Mhm.
imagine
Yeah.
Luke's age. And Yoda is so, when we look back at where he came from, he was so used to how the Jedi were trained. And mainly because by that age, they've formed attachments, which is not something that they want for Jedi. They come to love people, they have different emotions, a lot of anger. And we see that in the training between Luke and Yoda. He is tested a lot, and we see a lot of his frustrations, and he gets angry at himself, at Yoda at times. And I think that was the fear
Mhm.
Yoda had, especially being who his father was and what anger did to him. You know, he didn't want to see that created again. And that was the fear of him being too old. And, he already formed those emotions, and it's getting past that. That is the test.
And then we've got Return of the Jedi, and he's a knight, you know. And I
Yeah.
love when Han comes out of his cryogenic freeze, and they're like Luke's a Jedi. They tell him Luke's a Jedi Knight, and he's like delusions of grandeur. He's like, what?
Yeah.
I go to sleep and
I,
everything's changing.
Yeah, and I can only imagine what that was like seeing it for the first time. I was recently talking to my sister about it because she's just as big of a Star Wars nerd as I am. And we were like, imagine what that was like, because where we left Luke in Empire Strikes Back, he was kind of like helpless. And
Mhm.
then we come back and he's so powerful. Like even the
Got
way
a
he
new
walks into,
lightsaber. He's
the way he walks into Jabba's palace with this confidence, we're like, where did that come from? Whatever amount of time that was in between, he must have really gone through a lot to become who he is, because it's such a difference from Empire Strikes Back.
That's why I think that it's so rich, so many opportunities to tell these stories in between these films. He really leaps in between. That's why you have those crawls that kind of fill you in a little bit about what
Mhm.
happened. And I almost feel like I want to see that. I want to see what happened.
Yeah, right.
Like all the Clone Wars happen off screen in the cartoons, but there's so much there that you can tell stories about. Then we have the prequels when they're little kids, and then we've got the sequels. And a lot, again, has happened between the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy. And
Mhm.
it's not what we thought. It's not like the
A, v-
happy ever
a
ending,
very
you know?
different Luke. A
Mhm.
very different Luke. He
Yeah.
went from being like the epitome of hope, and then we see him in a very different place, which was very hard to see. I have different views on it.
Me too.
Um, that we can get into.
Yeah. So what do you think? Like, because I know Mark Hamill, that
Yeah.
first movie, they intentionally kind of made him like in the background because they didn't want him to overshadow Ray and her
Hmm.
journey and her storyline. So when they did the readings beforehand, Mark Hamill was brought in to kind of read the stage directions because he had no lines in that first movie, and they were teasing it, and you didn't know what. But in the whole plot was they're going to search for Luke Skywalker, and he had been in hiding. He'd been recluse because a lot of bad things happened. He tried to train Ben Solo, and he turned to the dark side. And
Yeah.
then, this, just horrible tragedy. So he kind of didn't believe in himself, I guess, right? And then when we see him come back in the second movie of that trilogy, it's that's what he says. He's like throws away the lightsaber. He's like, nope,
Yeah.
I don't want to do it.
Yeah. I think at the end of Force Awakens, we kind of have this hope. It's left with her holding out her hand
Hmm.
with the lightsaber, and we have this hope, and we think like, okay, they're gonna work together. And then we see the next film and just tosses it. And I remember seeing that for the first time, like, what? This is
Yeah.
what happened to Luke? That's not Luke. But yeah, it comes out of he feels like he failed the Jedi, he failed his nephew, he failed his sister.
Mhm.
I think that's a big thing. And it's just that does it for him. So it's hard seeing him in that place because, like I said, he's such a source of hope and light, and everything about Luke was redemption, and there's hope for everyone, and always finding the good and the bad. And then we want to see Luke like that, but I do understand seeing him in a different place. And again, going back to it makes him human.
Mm.
And that's a part of Luke that I like, something that we can relate to. And yeah, what would we do in that situation? We kind of felt the same way. So as hard as it is to see him in that place, I can understand it and be like, okay, yeah, he is human.
And I
Yeah.
think even Mark Hamill said that when he read the script. I think I heard him say that he didn't believe it at first. He's like, "This is not where I think the character would go." He said, "But I'll play it," and I
Yeah.
think he did play it, and he made it redemptive, like you said. He becomes the hero at the end of that movie. He sacrifices himself, and the power
Yeah.
that he has, it's like
Hmm.
incredible.
Right.
Yeah,
In which we think like he lost that power, but then he comes back so strong. And that's where we see the hope, and that's where we see the light. And he does sacrifice himself, and it kind of goes back to how Obi-Wan did the same. So he does ultimately commit to the light again, which,
yeah,
is good. We don't want to see him just give in to the place that he was in. We saw something better come of him, which was, it was nice.
yeah. Because in the end, he's kind of like just let the Jedi die, but I
Hmm.
think he did have hope there at the end, and he came back. So I think it was great. Yeah, I liked it. I thought that was a good arc there for him. Yeah,
And he gave
and
his confidence back,
he did.
like the whole brush off of the shoulder.
I love that. I
Yeah.
loved it.
That's an
Yeah,
iconic moment for me.
yeah.
He
And then
gained his power back.
he totally gained it. I mean, what he could do at that moment,
Mm.
that's
Mhm.
incredible,
We
right?
didn't know it was possible.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
both
it was.
both he and Leia showed like
Mhm.
amazing power, which you didn't think was possible. So
Yeah, something we didn't really see Leia tap into in the original. And
yeah.
yeah, I liked seeing that as well.
Yeah, it's a shame she couldn't have been around for that last one because I think it would have been
Yeah.
a different story.
It
Um,
was supposed to be her story, the last one.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
she was
Yeah.
gonna come into becoming a Jedi Knight or something, I think so.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
know they had them training, Disney was, like, sending them to the gym to do some,
Yeah.
interesting things, so it was
Yeah.
gonna be interesting. But e
Yeah.
either way, it's a story is what it is, so I accept it, and I like it, and I like their performances in it. I
Mhm.
think one regret that Mark Hamill says he has is there never was a point besides those glimpses in Return of the Jedi that you saw him in full Jedi Knight, Jedi Master power in his prime when he was young, which is why now I love these series
Yep.
even though
Mm.
it's people are critical of, it's digital AI, CGI manipulation, but you're seeing Luke in his prime as a Jedi Knight. What do you
Yep.
think about that? The appearance, the Mandalorian. What do you think?
I love it. I'm not for AI at all, but I'll allow that because I feel like it adds so much to the story and it's really needed. I love how that's the where Luke is in his prime. When we see him come get Grogu for the first time, seeing that, I have never cried over any film or show the way there were tears streaming down my face. I never cried like that over any film, but that was just so powerful to see Luke in that phase, which yeah, we never really got to see before that. The closest we got was Return of the Jedi, but that wasn't even his prime yet.
Yeah.
So I do love seeing in The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, him getting to interact with Ahsoka it's just great. I really do love that they're incorporating him into these shows because we really get to see how powerful he became.
Yeah, and Mark Hamill cooperated, lended his voice. They had other
Yeah,
actors doing the body capture and things like that, but Mark Hamill gave his blessing, so that was great.
yeah.
Did you know that that was gonna happen, or did you hear about the spoilers? Were you surprised when you were watching it?
I really tried to stay away from spoilers. I heard like little things, like people guessing what was going to happen. It's so hard now.
Yeah, it's so hard
It is
nowadays.
like you can't scroll Instagram or Facebook. It's just there. So I was really trying to stay away from it. But seeing when we first saw the cloak and then we saw the lightsaber,
Mhm.
and even first just
When you see
seeing
the
him come in on the
X-Rider.
X-Wing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I really try to stay away from it, but yeah, that was a surprise for me, and that was like the best thing they could have done.
And they did it so well. Like, you
It
don't
was
see his
genius.
face until the end, but you're like,
Hmm.
"It's gotta be
Yeah.
Luke with the green lightsaber." It
Yeah.
was so
And it
good.
was just like, no way, no
Yeah,
way.
yeah. But spoilers now, man, I guess we have to talk about spoilers
Hmm.
because I just hate them so much. I try my best to, like, just avoid any kind of websites that are talking about that, any reviews, but you can't avoid it. Of all things, I'm
No.
listening to the radio driving around, and on the radio, that's where they spoiled the whole Han Solo thing from the first, sequel movie, Force Awakens, and I was like, "Oh, I can't even listen to the radio without spoiling."
Yeah, I mean, that part wasn't spoiled that was very sad, that whole thing, but yeah, I'm watching the Darth Maul series now
Mhm.
with my sister, and I have to wait for her to get out of work because we watch it together. And she's like, you know, we got to stay offline to see any spoilers
That's it.
because I'm always on Instagram, and it's just all my whole
Hard to
algorithm is
avoid.
Star Wars. So
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah,
It's so hard to avoid. What do you think about Luke's relationship with R2D2?
I love that. And again, going back to the whole Skywalker family, how R2 was Padme's and then Anakin's and you know and just sticks around with him through everything. He's been through it all with
Yeah.
the whole family. And you know, even in the sequels when Luke goes into exile, R2 shuts down. And like that was so sad to me. And then he's finally back when Luke comes out. It just shows how close their relationship
Mhm.
is, even just with a droid.
Yeah,
But
again,
he's been through everything with him.
going back to those tropes of the fantasy, the wizard and the knight. He's really like the squire or the sidekick, but he's also his own hero himself. R2 has done some things. Some people, there's like theories that maybe he has some kind of force sensitivity. If a droid can have any force sensitivity, R2 certainly would have it.
How many situations did he save them from and he got out of? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
many.
Exactly. That scene with Jabba the Hutt in Return of the Jedi, I just love that, and that's why as of this recording, this is before the movie Grogu and the Mandalorian has come out, and I'm so excited to see Jabba's son and you know all this
Who
stuff.
knew that was going to be
I know,
something? But I'm
I know.
excited for it.
Exactly, because that scene when he faces Jabba and he's a Jedi Knight at that point. I was like, "Whoa, what's gonna happen now?" You know, how do you beat this big gangster from space, who's got, you know, Han Solo frozen, Leia's chained to his side, and he does it. He gets
Yeah.
thrown into the monster pit, and you
Mm.
see him. He's a Jedi Knight. You're like, "Yes."
Yeah. He has, it's all planned out. He has no fear. So we see. And then once he ends up in with the Rancor, it's like, there's no
Mhm.
getting out of, no one has ever gotten out of this. Even we see the reactions from the other characters. They're like, there's no getting out of
That's
this,
it,
but
it's
he
over.
somehow does. And that's another moment where we're like, okay, he's really powerful now. Like he's learned so much.
Yeah. And then the fight on the barge and it was great. Right there, you're like, "Oh, this is what I wanna
Another,
see."
yeah, another good connection with R2 when he gets in his
Yes.
lightsaber,
Shoots it
which is
out.
a great moment. Yeah,
I love it.
so good.
I love it. And then the Emperor, Palpatine, when Luke is fighting Darth Vader the second time, and that's where you see the Emperor just like, I'm gonna just abandon Vader, and you're gonna be my next sidekick, my number two, right? What'd you think of that fight scene? Was that the best one that you've seen?
So powerful because it's more than just a fight, it's very emotional. And that it's another time where Luke's goal isn't to destroy, it's to redeem, and that's what he's fighting out of. And he's tempted throughout the whole thing. Palpatine is constantly in his ear and trying to tempt him, and he knows that he was able to do it to Anakin. So he has this confidence that he'll be able to turn him, but that's just not who Luke is. And he escaped the temptations that Anakin couldn't. And that is not something Darth Vader saw was possible or the Emperor thought was possible. They were so confident that he could be turned, but that's just not who he is.
Yeah. Yeah, he refused to kill him. He said, "Nope,
Hmm.
I refuse."
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you see even Vader in the new series, he did think that the Anakin part of him was dead, but there was still that part of him, and Luke was able to bring that out. Luke Skywalker was the hero of the whole thing. If it wasn't for Luke, Vader never would have come back. You wonder if Leia would have been the other one, as they said, there is another. You wonder if
Mhm.
they could have maybe if she in the storyline in some alternate universe, if she would have been the one to turn him, because maybe she would have reminded him of her mom and everything.
Yeah.
Um, but I just love that. I love it.
Yeah. And I think going back to that, a lot of Luke's beliefs, even though he didn't even know it, were the same beliefs as his mother, which
Mm.
I love so much. And the only time that he was really tempted and showed some anger was when Darth Vader brought up that if he could not be turned,
Yes.
maybe his sister could. And that was like the one
That's when
time
he
we
comes.
really, yeah. Yeah, because, don't talk about his sister. Don't come after her. But even after that, he went back to being Luke, and
Yeah.
it's not about defeat, it's about redemption.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember you told me last time that you read the novels and now that it's not all in canon anymore,
Yeah.
but there was a great character called Mara Jade, who
Yeah.
Luke Skywalker marries and has a kid with. She
Mhm.
was the Emperor's hand at one point and a villain, and she turns. Do you want to see her back? And I know a lot of fans really want to see her become part of canon again. What do you think?
Yeah, I wish there was a world, and maybe there can be where the novels and the sequels can kind of meet. And I feel like there are kind of hints in there, having Ben turn to the dark side, which Jason, Leia's son, was the one who turned to the dark side, and Ben was Ben, Luke's son, was his apprentice, Jason's apprentice. Yeah, I did recently hear that there's a big push for Mary J to somehow come back and fit in there, and I think there kind of could be because there is time in there where we don't really know that part of his life. I don't know how it would work, but I would definitely be open to it. I think it could work. And yeah, I mean, she's a great character. And yeah, I wish it's really hard because I do like the sequels, but there's
Me
so
too.
many great things in in those books. So many
Yeah, and
great
they
things.
brought back a bunch of them. They brought back some of the villains that you see and some of the other side characters that you see that are familiar. So there is hope that
Yeah.
they'll include them.
Even Abeloth, there's
Mhm.
some talk of that character showing up in maybe the Ahsoka series. And that was a character in the book. So I feel like they are taking some stuff from there that could still fit pretty well into what they're making now. So
I
be
hope. 'Cause
interesting.
I
Yeah.
think that just like it was so important to see Anakin and Padme's relationship, I think Luke, that's a part of him that we haven't seen, and I think that's important because, he wanted to I don't wanna say that he needed to, like, settle down and have a family, but it would have brought so much more to his character to kinda show that, especially filling in the blank of what happened after Return of the Jedi and before The Force Awakens, right?
Yeah, and times have changed. You know how we look back at the prequels and it was Jedi can't be married or form attachments. That has changed once everything there was destroyed. And I think that would fit in because with Luke as a character, he's created a whole new Jedi order. Yeah, so his rules.
Yeah. Now, if they do bring back more of Luke in his prime, do you think they'll do more of the, like, the image capture, or do you think they'll
Yeah.
recast it and get someone else to play young Luke?
Like I said, I'm not for AI. I just and I said this last time about Leia, I just can't picture anyone else playing that character. So I would be for keeping him looking like Mark Hamill as much as possible because it would just be hard for me to buy. Yeah, even with a solo series, I couldn't do it. These are such iconic characters. It's just so hard to. It's almost like a cosplay seeing anyone
Yeah.
else. But that's just my opinion. It's very split. Star Wars fans argue a lot.
Yeah.
So it's very split, but yeah, he is Mark Hamill, and
He
Mark
is.
Hamill's him.
He is so great.
Yeah.
Um, which other characters have we left out that he kind of interacts with? Chewbacca, the Ewoks. Yeah, I love everything that he did in Return of the Jedi, and Chewie's been there, even in the sequels, working, yeah. So
Very devoted. Yeah,
yeah,
and you know what? Even the character, like the Ewoks that other characters were very impatient with, he wasn't. Even with C-3PO,
yeah,
like he's very understanding with him. It's just Luke has just a very different dynamic with these characters than the others do. There's more of a sense of patience and understanding with him. Yeah, it's very unique.
yeah. You see that right from the very beginning when he bought them and he's giving the bath to 3PO, and just, you're gonna get me
No
in
one else would
trouble.
have cared. Yeah,
Yeah,
no one else would have cared.
yeah. That's great. The great line, "Luke, I am your father," that's not the actual line. That specific line
No.
was never said, but we say that all the time. That's become so
Yeah,
part of pop culture. I said it to my
right.
kid growing up all the time. I would joke around. So that before they even watched Star Wars, they knew, "Luke, I am your father." What do you think of that line? It's become everywhere, right?
Right. Even though it's no, I am your father. Don't
Exactly.
know how that happened.
It
But
just
yeah,
becomes,
everyone knows
right?
it. Yeah. Everyone knows that Luke, I am your father. And even if you never saw Star Wars, you know that line. It's just
Exactly.
become one of the few iconic movie lines that even if you know nothing about Star Wars, you know that scene. And I've been trying to introduce my friends who've never seen Star Wars to Star Wars. I recently started them off with Revenge of the Sith, which I don't know if that was the best choice, but my next one was going to be Empire Strikes Back, then Return
Yeah.
of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Don't know about that choice, but
Yeah, I think about that, like, what order do I introduce people in? Because I heard Lucas say, "Just watch it chronologically," and I'm surprised since he released it, with the middle tril I try to get my kids, I got them to watch the first Star Wars, and they were actually a little bored with it. I don't know why,
Mm.
but they really fell in love with, The Mandalorian. That got them hooked,
Yeah,
and they are so
yeah,
excited for the new movie with Grogu.
I can
So
understand that.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that one appeals to kids a lot. Another thing I recently heard George talk about is that he doesn't like starting films in the beginning. He likes
Mm.
throwing you into the middle,
Yeah.
into the action because it just keeps your attention. And then once you've formed these relationships with the characters and an understanding of the characters, then you can go back and
Mhm.
you have a better understanding and want to know where they came from. Like Darth Vader, we see him as just this bad guy, but we know him so well. And then you can go back and understand it, which I think if you start in the beginning, maybe it would move a little slow to get to the very end. So I kind of like his whole idea about throwing you into the middle of the action.
And I guess also the special effects at the time, as spectacular as they were for Star
Mhm.
Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, his vision for what those prequels were going to be was so epic that I guess he
Mhm.
figured the technology just wasn't there yet to do it on such a big scale. And then you see all, the leaps and all the stunt work that was being done. I can't imagine doing all that with 1970s special effects, right?
Right. Which already, for 1977, that it looked great. George has just always been ahead of his time. With the prequels, he was doing things that no one was doing yet, and people didn't even know were possible. And that was another thing he got criticized for, making a lot of things CGI, and some people thought it was too much, but he really just wanted to push the envelope with a lot,
Absolutely.
and it inspired films we see now. But
So
he was the
many.
first to do a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, and he was inspired by a lot of things before him, but like you said, now he
Hmm.
becomes the inspiration. You wouldn't have had Battlestar Galactica without him. You wouldn't have had
Hmm.
a lot of these things, The Matrix and all these things that came after, all the special effects owe a lot to Industrial Light and Magic. He was so just the way we see movies nowadays, like the blockbusters. We talked about this on another podcast. It's changed everything, and it's all because of George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Those two.
Yeah. Even Luke Skywalker as a character has inspired other other characters in films. Just the whole idea of like the hero's journey. Yeah, we see that now, and yeah, I think a lot of people do credit George for creating the whole hero's journey through
Yeah,
Luke.
I think anyone who reads Harry Potter, right? There's a lot
Hmm.
of very much
Yeah.
similarities, and then Toy Story played up on that, and there's so much that it just
Hmm.
Lion King. You had, of course, the voice of Darth Vader with
Yeah. Yeah.
James Earl Jones, but yeah, it's so much. Anything we've left out? Anything you still want to mention that we didn't talk about?
I feel like again, I could go on and on about the Skywalker family as a whole and all those dynamics. And I still feel like there is more to explore. I'm really looking forward to the Ahsoka series,
Me too.
and we know that Anakin is going to be involved in that somehow. I also see a way that Luke could be involved somehow. Yeah, I feel there is more potential for him, but I hope that it's done in the right way because he's just such a great and lovable character. Um,
He's been
yeah,
through
you
so
don't want to mess
much.
it up.
And he
Hmm.
emerged amazing, and the sequels didn't ruin it. I think they
No,
kept it. It's still
I
great.
don't. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, but I like the whole idea that like you said, he's been through so much, and again, it fits in with the hero's journey. It fits in with relatability to people. Yeah, he's just a great, well-rounded character. Like to me, it's the perfect well-rounded character.
That's why his comeback in that scene, it was very much similar to when Vader was walking down that hallway and just slashing everybody in Rogue One,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But he just has this sense of he's a hero.
Yep.
He's not on the dark side, and that's what we need. That's exactly what Lucas was trying to create. He wanted to create these myths for the modern day that we all got from like fairy tales and that he saw in all those serial movies when he was a kid, and he really brought it to life. And I give him so much credit for that.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, that
Love a
was one of
good,
the
yeah.
characters that made me fall in love with movies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Love a good character that represents hope and redemption. It was perfectly done.
yeah. Well, thank you for talking to me again. We
Love
got to
it.
talk about other characters besides Skywalkers, but there's still Anakin, there's still
Yes,
Padme.
I would
There's a
love
lot.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My guest has been Alexandria Pascucci. She is so great. You're gonna see a lot of her. She's got short films coming out. She's gonna be theater stuff if you're in the New York area. So stay in touch. Keep us here. Thank you again. I'm so
Thank
grateful
you
to have
so
you here.
much. This was so fun.
Yeah.
I love
Thank
talking
you
about
again.
this stuff.
Same
Thank
here.
you.
So, all of you who are watching, please like, subscribe, share, comment. Let us know what we left out and what you love about Luke Skywalker. And we will see you next time on Greatest Characters in Pop Culture History.